We just, as 25-year-olds, couldn't get $20, $30 million of VC funding. So we more or less bootstrapped through angel investing, through a little bit of small scale venture investing and grants, and built the company up. And eventually got to a point where we were instrumental to drug discovery programs for all the big boys developing drugs for Zika virus, for COVID. We worked on Moderna, we worked on biotech, we worked on a number of those different programs across those years. But eventually got to the point where it was time to sell the organization and move on.
You're listening to the Real Returns podcast, where we learn how real investments can make a real impact. Join your hosts, Andrew and Dan, as they share stories and interview business leaders on how real estate and other forms of investment can create meaningful change for individuals and communities around the world.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Real Returns podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Reichert. I'm super excited today. We've got someone who I got connected to through YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And the fun thing about this is he and I are actually both young presidents, which, believe it or not, does not end up always being the case with YPO. We were just kind of joking around about that. And our companies are basically the same exact size. We both employ about 100 people. So I'm really excited. Right here, he's sitting at the intersection of research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Dr. Michael Johnson has been the president of the New Jersey Innovation Institute. Again, it's about a 100-person think tank that is accelerating innovation in health defense, workforce development. And he's actually a former biotech CEO, a scientist by training, which I think is cool. We can unpack that a little bit. But he's deeply passionate about getting those university inventions into the hands of the public. So, Dr. Michael Johnson, welcome to the show.
Andrew, thank you for having me. It's definitely a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so glad you're here. For folks who may not be familiar, can you just share a little bit about your journey? Like, how did you even get into what you're doing today?
Yeah, it's always funny how you get somewhere, because especially for my journey, very non-linear pathway. Like you mentioned, I'm a PhD scientist by training. I've always loved science. As a kid, I was blowing things up, shooting off rockets, playing with Legos and robots, and always super passionate about science and engineering and technology. And through my undergraduate studies, I got exposed to a lot of different types of research projects. Ultimately got an internship at NASA out in California and realized that, hey, I love research, and the career for me is being a scientist. To be a scientist, you got to do a PhD if you want to do real science on a day-to-day basis. So I went and did a PhD at Rutgers University. And during my PhD work, I was fortunate to get a fellowship, which allowed me to do lots of interdisciplinary research. And I was exposed to another PhD student who invented a really cool technology for imaging tissues, like mouse brains and biopsies. Instead of taking tissues and looking at them in 2 dimensions on glass microscope slides, he had invented a way to actually image them in 3D while he was a PhD student. I met him. I thought it was the coolest thing. We both jumped together and started working on this as an idea, a research project. It eventually evolved into a company. So we left our PhDs early. Eventually we'd finish, but we left our PhDs early and launched the company Visicol, which is a biotech company. It was focused on helping pharma companies figure out if their drugs are safe, are they efficacious, where they go, what do they do, by using this super advanced microscopy technology that my co-founder invented. I was the CEO, he was the CSO. We took that from 2 guys in a closet up to about 50 people. We did work for all 20 of the top 20 pharma companies in the world, and ultimately sold the company back in 21 to a publicly traded Swedish company. So I went the whole journey of like inventing technology, commercializing it, launching it, and big impact. And we had hundreds of publications, thousands of research labs that have used our tools and products, and about 100 pharma companies have used them in their drug discovery programs to actually get drugs to market. And then did that about 2.5 years after the acquisition, stayed along with the parent company, took a role as chief commercial officer for a few of their daughter companies. And then about 2 years ago, after our earnout was up, so really different running a company you used to own versus running a company you do own. So wanted to step out of that and was looking at cool new stuff to do. And New Jersey Innovation Institute reached out to me. And their whole mission was around how do we get intellectual property out of the university, turn it into products and services, how do we foster research, how do we partner between academia and the outside world. And I thought it was a great opportunity. I thought it was a really cool thing to get involved with. And I jumped headfirst into the president role. So today I'm president of this awesome organization where the whole mission is focused around how do we get technologies out of our universities and into the world. We are owned by the state's Polytechnic University in New Jersey called NJIT. lots of great researchers, lots of great resources like most universities, but really tough for the outside world to leverage those. So we are a separate 501c3. Our whole mission is to leverage all those great resources, be a conduit to the outside world, but actually move the speed of business. So we work with Merck on pharma projects and startups and innovations. We work with the Department of Defense on advanced manufacturing, putting electronics into warheads and different types of explosives. We do a ton of healthcare IT work. We've launched an AI division that's focused on consulting for small and mid-sized businesses, leveraging our computer science program at the university. End of the day, though, we're trying to foster innovation, accelerate translational research, and also upskill workers. And couldn't be happier to be in a role like it and be focused on so many cool different industries, especially today when technology is moving so fast.
Yeah, very cool. And no doubt about that. Technology is moving very fast today. I mean, I feel like I can't keep up with what's happening in AI and tech, and every single day it's something different. I want to double click on the intellectual property piece. So one of the things I literally just heard this a couple of weeks ago, intellectual property is like the only asset class that's mentioned in the Constitution, like the actual ability to like protect one's trades and, to be an author, which by the way, you now are, and I am as well. And to be able to like protect that is an investment. It's an asset. So on our show, we talk about the impact of our investments. We talk about assets, and we talk about real assets. So things like real estate and investing in, all kinds of real asset classes. We talk about prop tech, but we don't often talk about intellectual property. So I'd love to like dig into that a little bit with you. Can you just talk a little bit about your venture studio and the concept of intellectual property, and what does it actually mean to support the creation and protection of intellectual property?
Well, you touched on something earlier there, which I think is foundational to the country, but also just venture investing, is that intellectual property is what keeps the country moving forward. And what's happened over the last 50, 60 years is we've moved intellectual property creation from companies to higher ed. Very few organizations, even big companies, invent anything. They do incremental change. Like my iPhone 16 is the same darn thing as my iPhone 11. Very incremental in nature.
100% true.
where those big ideas, those big changes, they come from faculty sitting in a room for 20 years just tinkering away. And maybe they come up with something, maybe they don't, but that's where our innovations actually come from. So in our role, we have a lot of responsibility to try and get those things into the world. And what typically happens is they get stuck because the faculty who's great at inventing is not good at commercializing. And they don't want to. It's just not what they're designed to do. It's not what their love or their passion is. So for us, our venture studio found this problem that we have, especially in New Jersey, where we don't have the same founder landscape that you have in San Diego or Boston or San Francisco. We have a ton of founders in garages. We can just invest capital. We have tons of ideas. We have tons of corporate partners who want to be customers of cool innovations, but we don't have the people that are starting these things. So what we said as a university is let's put up a bunch of money and build companies de novo using our intellectual property. So let's go hire a CTO. Let's go hire a CEO. Let's get a corporation to sign up on day one to say, I will be a customer in 12 months if you do A, B, and C. And that's what we're focused on. Over the next 4 years, we're trying to launch about 10 companies, put $1 million into each company through a fund that we created with our Economic Development Authority in New Jersey, and create those with academic intellectual property from NGIT, other universities in the state, and also IP from universities. But getting that IP into companies and turning it into that's challenging. A lot of faculty and people think you have a patent and someone just like comes along and gives you money. You got to turn it into something. And that's the hard part. And that's what we're trying to help with and de-risk for us.
Interesting. That makes sense. So I think what I'm hearing is universities are good at creating the intellectual property, but not commercializing it.
Correct.
Is that true? And then, so you're trying to come in to then commercialize it. And are you doing that through public-private partnerships? Like, does the university still get involved, or is it like they're selling their IP? What does that look like?
It's ideally a partnership. So the university, what they're great at is inventing new stuff. So if we're going to take a piece of intellectual property and create a company, and we're currently doing this in the PFAS space. So these are those forever chemicals that everyone's getting sued about. We have intellectual property at NGIT to how to test for PFAS in water and products, et cetera. So we're building a company where you send a sample in, you get a test and it says, hey, you got tons of PFAS. buy this filter, fix it. A simple at-home test that we're launching with intellectual property. So where the university is coming in is their faculty is helping launch the company. They get equity. They sit in the cap table. They're going to continue to develop new intellectual property to make our test better, also filtration technologies and things that stack on it. And then from our point of view, we're hiring the CTO, who's more of a marketer, commercialization guy or girl. We're trying to launch that. We're building it. We're scaling it. So we're working with corporations. We're working with all sorts of companies to help us scale, both for municipalities, but also for consumers. But we're putting the two together because they are vastly different.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then what's the end goal? Is it to sell that or just like run it into perpetuity? What's the end goal?
Like any venture fund, we want to generate ROI. So for us, it's can we have this venture fund, which is about $12 million, successfully deployed, return on investment, and then go get our next fund and keep going. We want to do it at a larger scale. New Jersey is a state that does have a founder problem where we have all the pieces. We don't really have the founders. We don't really have the VCs in the state. So we have to put these things together and create it. That's what we're doing with the venture studio in the state. And once that gets rolling, the idea would be to put more and more capital into that. We're going to open up Rutgers University, Princeton, Rowan, Stevens, all the great universities of the state, and try and leverage their intellectual property as well.
Got it. And are there specific colleges you're working with? Are they the ones in New Jersey or elsewhere?
Right now, it's predominantly New Jersey and then corporations within the state and the tri-state area. But we're open-minded. But it all comes down to having the right people at the table. People are open-minded and want to let us dig into the intellectual property and see what makes sense. But it's also finding the right team. The hardest part of finding CEOs and CTOs, the guy or girl who says, I'm going to work 100 hours a week for 5 years with no guarantee of anything. Like that's a rare person. They're tough to find. And that's what our biggest gap is with venture studios.
Yeah, that makes sense. So having that founder that understands it, is committed, and can execute. Now, from that standpoint, you've actually done this from what I understand. Right. You had a university spin out that you sold. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, our company, we started at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And when you have any intellectual property, university owns it. So we as students had to go to our tech transfer office and say, hey, we want to license our own intellectual property and create a company. And this was crazy because like no graduate students ever do this, especially in life sciences. Mm-hmm. So we did that. And then even more difficult, we had to go raise funding. And like any company started in life sciences, it's typically a faculty with like 1,000 publications and 50 grad students. For us as 25-year-olds to go and raise venture capital funding to launch a biotech company is super abnormal, like outside of Elizabeth Holmes, and didn't work out well for her. So super rare. We're able to launch the company, get it off the ground, and then take it from zero all the way to we sold for just shy of about $20 million to a public traded Swedish company. And we were profitable the whole way. So we built our company as a contract research business. We wanted to build it as a diagnostic business, but we just, as 25-year-olds, couldn't get $20, $30 million of VC funding. So we more or less bootstrapped through angel investing, through a little bit of small scale venture investing and grants, and built the company up. And eventually got to a point where we were instrumental to drug discovery programs for all the big boys developing drugs for Zika virus, for COVID. We worked on Moderna, we worked on biotech, we worked on a number of those different programs across those years. But eventually it got to the point where it was time to sell the organization and move on. But yeah, it took it from start all the way to the end, which is an awesome experience.
That's cool. And was Rutgers still a partner in that? They still own the IP when you sold it?
They still own it today. Yeah. So when we are licensed, I think it was like 15 or 18 years, some long period of time for the patent life that we had from them. So we had that patent. And then once we left Rutgers, we developed a ton of other patents and technology on top of that we owned outright. But the original core intellectual property still owned by Rutgers. Rutgers still gets royalties. They were on the cap table. So we did the acquisition. They got a nice check, which was awesome for them. And that's the whole point. You do want to have return on investment as a university for the research that you're developing and supporting.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. So I don't know if this is like a politicized question or not, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
I know where it's going.
I'm sure you were expecting it, but like, what's your perspective on like defunding of universities, and particularly, I mean, Rutgers is a public university, I think. So like, what are you experiencing, and what's your perspective on kind of some of the legislative discussion around removing capital from those universities?
For an organization where we're mostly funded through federal and state funding, I mean, this year has been tough, right? Like every week I just got like a bunch of emergency emails this morning. Every week has been difficult because uncertainty is challenging. You don't know what direction you're going into. You don't know what funding landscape looks like. And the changes that we're seeing now are the most profound changes we've ever seen in higher ed. So things like indirect costs, things like just overall grant funding being reduced, these are things we've never seen. We've seen slight changes, like a few percentage points. We've never seen anything like this. higher ed and research institutes, they're not designed to change rapidly. Like if I have a giant building I built and you cut my indirect costs by 50%, I can't just like undo the building. I mean, these are long-term, decadal-long investments that we've made in higher ed and research. So for one, that's difficult. But what I would say that we've done badly as an innovation economy, innovation ecosystem, is we've done a bad job of actually doing innovation for Americans. And what I mean by that is when you think of like pharma, you think of 6 and 7 figure drugs that nobody can afford. Most Americans, they want their Lipitor. They want affordable drugs they take every single day they can't afford today. They couldn't care less if Pfizer is developing a new cell and gene therapy drug, but that's where our effort is. We look at like automation. This takes people's jobs. We look at the internet. It took people's jobs and sent them to other countries. So for the average American, they kind of hate innovation. And I think for us, being in like an ivory tower and talking down to people has been awful. Instead of saying, how do we build an innovation system that supports all people? How do we create jobs that are blue collar jobs by bringing those back? How do you bring manufacturing to the US where our standard of living is higher and our cost is higher? We haven't asked the right questions. So I think part of what we're seeing now is like you reap what you sow. And we talk down to people. We develop things at the exclusion of most people in the US. And I think, unfortunately, it's coming home to roost. And we have to take a hard look at ourselves as a research community and say, yeah, it's cool to do really cool cutting edge science, but like what is actually in the best interest of the American people? That question hasn't really been asked. And you're starting to see that. But in the meantime, we still don't know where it'll shake out. It looks like the priorities are changing. The overall funding is being reduced. But we're calling into question what we've been doing for the last few decades. And I think it's probably a good question that we should be asking.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I appreciate you engaging with me on a potentially prickly topic. But are you finding that if you take an entire institution in academia, is it that there are pockets of innovation, or is it every institution that is innovative? Like where are you seeing the real, hey, we're creating patents, we're innovating in a serious way? Is it particular institutions? Is it particular areas of those institutions?
I think this is what concerns me the most with the changes we see now is the way innovation works. You get a bunch of smart people who just don't care about money, don't care about commercialization. You put them in a room for a few decades, give them a bunch of money and let them run. That's how it works. You can't have them fill out reports. You can't even check in on them. You can't ask them to say like, what do you accomplish? That's not how it works. But one day, like my co-founder, they will wake up and they'll create something that changes the world. Where it comes from, you can't predict. Their return on investment, you can't figure it out. But what's interesting about higher ed is that's not where most of the dollars actually go. It's the administrative burden. It's building expensive buildings. It's all the other stuff. It's not the smart PhDs in a room doing research. But it's hard to say where exactly it comes from. There's people innovating all over the place. Every university is just putting those people in a position to be successful. But I would say the administrative burden for higher ed has gotten just out of hand the last few decades. You look at faculty have grown very linearly. Administrative burden is exponentially increased across the board. And that's not because of higher ed itself. It's because of regulations, constraints, a bunch of other things that are out there. Free money, frankly, causing a lot of folks to build things like, labs don't need marble countertops as you walk into a building and 7-story atriums. I mean, there's been a lot of waste in higher ed, but the just faculty in a room, that is where innovation happens.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it requires patience and patient capital, which patience is a virtue. It's not something that like everybody has. And if you're looking at, for example, trying to balance the national budget, it's like, wow, so there is pain right now. And so people are cutting and they're not thinking 20, 30, 50 years down the line. What are the ramifications of that? If I could just dig in one more level and then we can move on. When that happens, so administrative costs maybe go up in academia, you've got these longer lead times. Do you find that the private organizations, so you mentioned the iPhone earlier, and I agree, by the way, innovation died with Steve Jobs. I mean, my iPhone is exactly like you said, just like the 11. But Steve Jobs did come up with the iPhone, and that was innovative. And so there's certainly the private sector is innovating, obviously. So you mentioned IP is really being generated in academia. I guess I just want to challenge it a little bit. When it doesn't happen, are you seeing it happen in private markets? Like where do the private players come in?
It does happen in private industry. It's just you have to find investors who are willing to tolerate that. You look at NVIDIA, for example, like they were nothing until all of a sudden they were something. And now if somebody's hung on for 10 years on that investment, they're making a tremendous amount of money. It's just that is exceedingly rare. Investors are looking a lot more short term than they ever have. With our private equity investments, we're looking 5-year windows. You can't do big innovations in 5 years, and you might have to wait like they do with NVIDIA for 10 plus years of technology even to catch up to where you can manufacture a chip where you could do what you knew you could do, you just couldn't physically do it. And I think that is something that's relatively rare. And today, since 21, we've seen venture capital investing just evaporate across the board. I think it's 70% of investing now is just all in AI. So a lot of the industries that are out there, they've lost a bunch of money and we're focused there. So it happens. It's just more difficult. Those truly breakthrough things, though, they do come from academia. Just a person sitting in a room for 20 years and all of a sudden they come up with something that changes the world. Most of the time it does come from academia, and it's academia partnering with industry where industry is doing that. And we see that works out really well. If industry can be patient and work with faculty and they can do it and they can collaborate, they can come up with some great things. So it's not that private industry doesn't do it. It's just that it's more difficult to fund. It's more difficult to sell. If you're a CEO trying to justify why you're spending 10 years on something, you're going to lose your job. I mean, it's just not how it works in today's environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I've seen that for sure in, academia, private, really everywhere. Just to kind of wrap a bow around this, let's just say if I'm an investor and I want to get exposure to IP, venture, some of the stuff that you're talking about here, what's my opportunity? Like, can I go so you went to Rutgers. I mean, you had a relationship there and you're like, hey, can we license this IP and create this thing and sell it? Are there funds that do this? Can I invest directly in organizations? Like if I'm an investor, how should I be thinking about IP as a part of frankly, just part of my allocation?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as an individual, it's extremely inefficient to do it individually on your own. So for example, like if you're running a VC firm, you can't really do it for less than $100 million fund just because you can't have the skilled team to look at intellectual property to figure out what to invest in unless you get to a certain size. And all sorts of people try and do the angel investing thing, go out on their own and look at opportunities. I mean, there's a few people that kind of hit home runs just out of sheer luck with that. But for the most part, you just can't efficiently do it. To make one investment, you have to look at 1,000 companies. You just don't have the bandwidth to do that or the deal flow of good companies for most people. So what I would suggest for people who want to put this in their portfolio, and I'm not financial advice, but is look to be an LP in a fund. If there's a couple areas that you want to tap into, you can be an LP for small stakes in some funds that are out there. There are some angel funds that will actually pool together 50, 100, 200 angels together as an LP in a larger fund or an investment. So that's the route I would say. And then diversify, have 20, 30 things that you're investing into as an LP or a few different funds that you're investing into as an LP as well. But yeah, doing it on your own, you're just not going to be able to do it. There's also too many barriers. Getting access to deals is really challenging to do.
Yeah, that was kind of what I had hoped you would say, because I do think that it requires a very particular skill set to be able to dive in, understand what am I really investing in? Right. What is this organization? What's the value of the IP? What's the value of this patent? What's the value of the trademark, the copyright, things like that. So I like where your head's at there. I had a similar thought. Well, this has been great. We're just about out of time here. I'd love to jump into the lightning round, get to know you a little bit, kind of personally and professionally. So what would you say is your biggest win?
Biggest win is getting married to my wife. We've been together since we were 18. It's almost close on 20 years here. So met her my freshman year of college and been together since. So big win for me.
Awesome. And remind me again, you have a couple kids?
5-year-old, 3-year-old, and we got one 3-4 weeks out. So almost 3.
Awesome. And what would you say is your favorite movie?
Definitely Commando. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator, all the 90s movies. But Commando, I'd say, is number 1.
Good stuff. How about favorite food?
Chicken fingers, extra honey mustard.
That's awesome. Like Chick-fil-A or like it just...
I do like Chick-fil-A. With the kids, throwing them in the ball pit and having a date with my wife. Can't beat that.
All right. I just have to ask, because I know you're super into health and fitness. How does that align with your diet?
So that's like the cheat meal. You go there, you try, or you can eat okay there. So you can get like the grilled chicken, you can get like a diet soda. Still not great, but like it's all seed oils and whatnot. But like if you need to eat out, that's not the worst thing you could do.
I go to Chick-fil-A, I get their market salad, then I get a side of like the 12-piece, just the grilled nuggets, and I throw that on top of the market salad.
There you go. No, in my book that I wrote, I actually have like a whole section on how to eat fast food healthy. Like if you go to McDonald's, the only place you can go to, like what do you get?
Patties.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'll take 20 patties, no cheese. Awesome. What would you say is the current way that you're looking to grow personally or professionally right now, current growth edge?
So for me right now, I think I'm focused on, even this podcast is marketing it, is just content generation. I never did a good job of personal branding in the past. I was really digging into getting out there on podcasts, trying to write as much as I possibly can, generate content, and just be out there in the public domain. So that's something I've been leaning into a lot.
Yeah, awesome. What's some really good content you're taking in these days? Books, podcasts, anything like that?
I got into Alex Hormozy recently. I've been digging all his videos. I read his books. He's got one coming out shortly here. But just like really basic principles behind businesses. And we look to starting companies from a venture studio, give them some tool books. His books are awesome for that. So anyone who's running a small to medium-sized business, I highly recommend all his stuff. But I've been digging through all that recently.
Yeah, good stuff. If folks want to connect with you, what's the best way to connect with you? I know you got the book. How would you recommend people kind of follow what you're up to?
For NJI, it's just njii.com. But for me personally, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, X, all the different places. You find someone on YouTube. And then my book, fitness book, is 1%dad.com. You can get it there for free or on Amazon.
Awesome. So 1%dad.com, Michael Johnson on X or LinkedIn. Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. Really enjoyed hearing a little bit of your story. I love just kind of talking about IP and really fascinating thinking about IP as an asset class, as an investment, and what impact that can have and has had for forever, and how academia is really playing a critical role in that. So thanks for being on the show. Really enjoyed having you. Thanks for our listeners for listening in. We'll catch you all next time.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Real Returns Podcast. We hope that you learned something new about how you can invest to make a lasting impact on those around you. Please be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts, leave us a review, and share about us on social media. We hope you will join us for our next episode, where we will be continuing the conversation around impactful real estate investing.